everyone, welcome to my channel. Today I'm going to tell you a story that completely changed my life, and that will probably shock you as much as I was. Before I start, let me know in the comments where you're watching from. I love knowing where my followers are. The story I'm going to tell happened 3 years ago, on what should have been the happiest day of my dad's life, his wedding to my stepmother, Isabel. I was 26 at the time, and I never imagined that I would be kicked out of my dad's own wedding. But what she didn't know was that Dad had a surprise in store for her, a surprise that we wouldn't find out until 6 months later, when he passed away. Stay tuned until the end because you won't believe what happened when the will was read. My name is Natalie Brooks, I'm 29 now, and I have a degree in business administration from the University of Denver. I work as a financial consultant, ironically, something my dad always wanted me to do. He was a retired accountant and would always say, "Natalie, my child, money doesn't grow on trees, but a good financial education can work miracles." I grew up with only my father, Thomas Brooks. My mother, Helen, died when I was just 8 years old, from breast cancer. It was devastating for both of us. Dad never fully recovered from the loss of Mom, but he did his best to be both a father and a mother at the same time. He worked as an accountant for a construction company in Denver, and even with a modest salary, he always made sure I didn't go without. We grew up very close. He would take me to work during school breaks, teaching me about spreadsheets and numbers. "One day you'll understand why this is important," he would always say. And he was right. Everything changed when I was 22 and finishing college. Dad met Isabel Wellington at the supermarket, literally. She dropped a can of tomato sauce and he helped her pick it up. Can you believe it? A can of tomato sauce changed our lives forever. Isabel was 38 at the time, divorced, and had 16-year-old twin sons, Marcus and Dylan Wellington. She worked as a saleswoman at a designer clothing store in downtown Denver, and I have to admit, she was a beautiful woman. Blonde, well-groomed, always had her nails done, and wore expensive clothes. The complete opposite of my mother, who was dark-haired, plain, and preferred jeans and t-shirts. At first, I tried to give her a chance. I swear I did. When Dad introduced me to her, 3 months after that meeting at the supermarket, she was polite. Not friendly, but polite. "So you're the famous Natalie," she said, giving me a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Your father talks about you a lot." "Only good things, I hope," I replied, trying to break the ice. "Sure," she said, but there was something in her voice that made me uncomfortable. Her sons, Marcus and Dylan, were complicated. Marcus was your typical rebellious teenager, long hair, always wearing black, defiant eyes. Dylan was quieter, but no less hostile. They barely spoke to me when we saw each other, and when they did, it was always sarcastically. Their relationship progressed quickly. Dad was clearly in love, or at least he thought he was. He started spending money he didn't have. Expensive dinners, gifts for Isabel, new clothes to impress her. I worried about our joint account dwindling, but when I tried to talk to him about it, he would just smile and say, "Natalie, honey, I deserve to be happy again. Your mother would want me to be happy." And how could I argue with that? Of course I wanted him to be happy. But there was something about Isabel that bothered me deeply. The first real sign came at Christmas that year. Dad invited Isabel and the kids to spend Christmas with us. It was the first time anyone else would be in our house for Christmas since Mom died. I was nervous but hopeful. I made the whole dinner: turkey, mashed potatoes, pumpkin pie, everything Mom used to make. I spent days cooking, wanting everything to be perfect. When they arrived, Isabel looked at the table and said, "Oh, how rustic." "Marcus, Dylan, just wait, we're going to Grandma Wellington's for dinner later today." My heart sank. Dad tried to hide his disappointment, but I could see it in his eyes. He had expected it to be special, too. Isabel, honey, Dad said gently, Natalie worked really hard to prepare all this. I'm sure she did, she replied, but she didn't even taste the food properly. Sorry, Thomas, but we promised Mom we'd be there at 8. They left at 7:30. Dad and I ate our Christmas dinner alone, in silence. It was at that moment that I realized Isabel wasn't interested in being a part of our family, she wanted to replace our family with her own. 6 months later, Dad called me over to talk. We were sitting on the porch, drinking iced tea like we had since I was little. He was nervous, fidgeting with his hands constantly. Natalie, you know I love you so much, right? You're the most important thing in my life. I know, Dad. You mean a lot to me, too. I asked Isabel to marry me, he said in one breath, as if he wanted to get the words out quickly. And she said yes. My stomach clenched, but I forced a smile. Congratulations, Dad. If she makes you happy, then I'm happy. Thank you, honey. It means a lot to me to have your approval. He paused. There's one thing, though. Isabel wants me to sell the house. Sell the house. I couldn't hide my shock. Dad, this is our house. It's where you and Mom lived, where I grew up, where all our memories are. I know. But she says it would be better if we started our new life in a neutral place. Somewhere that's ours, not mine and your mom's. And what did you say? I said I needed to talk to you first. We spent hours talking that day. I told him that if that was what made him happy, I would support it. But inside, my heart was breaking. That house was all I had left of my mother. A week later, the house went on the market. The house sold quickly, the real estate market was booming in Denver. Dad used the money to buy a new house in a more expensive neighborhood, a house that Isabel had picked out. It was modern, all white, and devoid of character. Nothing like our cozy red brick house. When I first saw the new house, Isabel made a point of giving me a tour. This is the living room, she said proudly. I decorated it all myself. And this is Thomas's office, he's going to be working from home now, doing freelance work. Working from home? I asked, surprised. Dad had never mentioned it. Oh, yeah, we decided it would be best for him to retire early. After all, Marcus and Dylan are going off to college soon, and they need more attention right now. I then realized what was happening. Dad was being financially stretched. The new house was expensive, Isabel's childcare expenses were high, and she had convinced him to leave his steady job to work freelance, something much less financially secure. When Dad and I were alone later, I tried to broach the subject. Dad, are you sure about this decision to work from home? You've always valued stability. Isabel's right, Natalie. I'm getting older, and the boys need a father figure to be around. Besides, I can do the same thing from home. But I knew better. Freelance accounting didn't pay as well as a steady job, especially without the network of contacts he'd built over the years. Marcus and Dylan moved into the new house, and it quickly became clear that they viewed Dad as a bank, not a stepfather. Marcus wanted a new car for his 18th birthday. Thomas, I overheard Isabel saying one day, Marcus really needs a car. How is he going to get a job without transportation? Isabel, a new car is too expensive. How about a used one? A used one. Thomas, you can't expect Marcus to drive just anything. He needs something reliable and safe. Dad ended up buying Marcus a new Honda Civic. $15,000 out of his savings. Dylan, not wanting to be left behind, decided he wanted expensive music equipment. He's got a lot of talent, Isabel insisted. It could be his future. Another $3,000 on sound equipment. I watched all this with growing horror. In less than 2 years, Dad had spent almost all of the savings he and Mom had saved over 20 years of marriage. I tried to talk to him about it several times, but Isabel was always around, or he would change the subject. When I finally got to talk to him alone, he was defensive. "Natalie, I know you're worried, but these are my kids now, too. I need to treat them the way I would treat you." "Dad, but you never bought me a $15,000 car. I worked for mine. Circumstances were different then. Now I can give them what I couldn't give you." But that wasn't true. He couldn't. He was just pretending he could, and it was leading us to financial ruin. The wedding was set for the fall, September 2021. Isabel wanted something big and fancy, of course. The venue was the Denver Botanic Gardens, one of the most expensive places in the city for weddings. "It'll cost $15,000 just for the venue," Dad told me, looking pale. $15,000. "Dad, that's a lot of money." "I know, but it's important to Isabel. She's never had a real wedding, her first one was at the registry office." In addition to the venue, there was the dress, $2,000, the photographer, $3,000, the food, $20,000 for 100 guests, the band, $4,000, the flowers, $1,500, the cake, $800. The list went on and on. Dad had to take out a loan from the bank to pay for everything. When I found out, I was desperate. "Dad, you can't go into debt like that. What if something happens? How are you going to pay for it?" "Natalie, stop worrying. Everything will be fine. Besides, after the wedding, we'll be able to save more. Isabel will help with the expenses." But I knew Isabel had no intention of contributing financially. She had quit her job at the clothing store months earlier, saying she wanted to focus on the family. During the wedding planning, it became clear that I wasn't welcome in the decision-making process. Isabel would ask me for my opinion on small things. "Do you think the flowers should be white or cream?" But the big decisions were made without me. When it came time to choose a bridesmaid's dress, Isabel took me to an expensive boutique. "You'll be my bridesmaid, of course," she said, but she didn't seem thrilled about the idea. "Thank you, Isabel. I'm honored." She picked out a pale pink dress that cost $400. It was pretty, but way out of my recent college graduation budget. "Isabel, are you sure about this dress? It's a little expensive for me." "Oh, Thomas can afford you," she said casually. "After all, you're his daughter." Another $400 coming out of Dad's dwindling savings. In the weeks leading up to the wedding, the tension at home was palpable. Marcus and Dylan were stressed about the move. They were going to have to share a room for the first time in their lives, since I kept my room for when I visited. "Why does Natalie need a room here?" I heard Marcus ask his mother. "She doesn't even live here anymore." "Honey, it's temporary. After the wedding, we'll convert that space into something more useful." My heart sank. Were they planning to take away my room? When I confronted Dad about it, he was embarrassed. "Natalie, you have your own apartment now. You don't need a room here anymore." "Dad, it's always been my room. Ever since I was a kid. What if I want to come over and stay for a few days? You can sleep on the couch. Or we can set up an air mattress." It was at that moment that I realized that my place in the family was being systematically erased. First our home, then our family traditions, now my room. What would be next? 2 weeks before the wedding, the incident that should have warned me of what was to come happened. I was helping with the final preparations when my phone rang. It was my best friend from college, Jessica Chin. "Nat. You're not going to believe it, I got that job at Microsoft in Seattle." I squealed with joy and started congratulating her. We'd been talking for about 5 minutes when I felt Isabel staring at me with an annoyed expression. When I hung up, she said, "Natalie, we're trying to focus on the wedding preparations here. Could you save the personal conversations for later? Sorry, Isabel. It was just my friend telling me some good news. Good for her. But today is about me and your dad, not your friends. The coldness in her voice surprised me. It was as if I were an employee being reprimanded, not the groom's daughter. Later, I told Dad about the incident. He sighed and said, "Natalie, Isabel is stressed about the wedding. You know how brides get. Be patient with her." Always the same excuse. Isabel was stressed, Isabel was nervous, Isabel needed understanding. What about me? When was anyone going to care about my feelings? The week of the wedding, Isabel became even more controlling. She made a list of rules for the day. "Natalie, you need to be ready by 9 a.m. for the pre-ceremony photos. No phones during the photos, we don't want any distractions. And please try to smile naturally. In the engagement photos you looked forced. Oh, and another thing," she continued, "some of my friends are going to be there, and they don't know the situation about your mother. It would be best if you didn't mention her during the reception. We don't want to make people uncomfortable. No mention of my mother. At my father's wedding. Isabel, with all due respect, she was my father's wife for 15 years. She's part of our history. She emphasized. She was his wife. Now I am. And this is our day, not hers." When I told Dad this, he looked conflicted for the first time. "Isabel, maybe that's asking too much." "Thomas, I'm just trying to avoid awkwardness. You don't want your new family members to be uncomfortable, do you?" And Dad, as always, relented. The wedding day arrived, September 18, 2021. It was a beautiful fall day in Denver, with blue skies and leaves just beginning to change color. Ironically, the kind of day Mom always said was perfect for weddings. I arrived early at the Denver Botanic Gardens, as Isabel had ordered. The venue looked truly beautiful, decorated with white and gold flowers, elegant chairs arranged in a semicircle around an arch covered in roses. Isabel was in the bride's room, being prepared by a team of professionals, a makeup artist, a hairstylist, a manicurist. She was wearing a stunning wedding dress that had cost over $2,000. "Natalie," she exclaimed when she saw me, but she didn't look genuinely happy. "You're late." "It's 9:05. Sorry, the traffic was terrible." "It doesn't matter. Put on your dress and let's start the photos." I quickly changed and joined the group for the pre-ceremony photos. The photographer was professional, but I felt out of place. Every photo was of Isabel with her friends, Isabel with her kids, Isabel by herself. I was in maybe 3 shots, always kind of off to the side. "Now we're going to do some family photos," the photographer announced. "Sure," Isabel said. "Marcus, Dylan, come here." They positioned themselves next to her, and the photographer began taking pictures. "What about Natalie?" the photographer asked, noticing me standing nearby. "Oh, she's not family," Isabel said casually. "She's just Thomas's daughter." Just Thomas's daughter. I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. The photographer looked confused, but he kept taking pictures. When Dad arrived an hour later, he was beaming. Wearing a new suit, another $300 he didn't have, his hair cut and his beard trimmed. He looked happy, genuinely happy, for the first time in a long time. "Natalie, my dear, you look beautiful," he said, giving me a big hug. "Thank you, Dad. You look very handsome too." "Thomas, come here," Isabel called. "We need to do the pictures before the ceremony." During the photos with Dad, I finally felt included. He made sure I was in several pictures with him, and I could see the love in his eyes. At least to him, I still mattered. The ceremony began at 3 p.m. There were about 100 guests, Isabel's friends, some of her relatives, some of Dad's old co-workers, and a few close family friends. I knew maybe 10 people there. I walked down the aisle as the bridesmaid, smiling at the guests. Dad stood at the altar, waiting, tears in his eyes. When Isabel started walking down the aisle, he cried with emotion. She looked really beautiful, I have to admit. The ceremony was traditional. They exchanged vows they had written, beautiful vows about new beginnings, second chances, and building a family together. When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, everyone applauded. I applauded too, trying to genuinely be happy for Dad. But during the reception, things started to go wrong. Dinner was served at 6 p.m. I was seated at the family table, which included Isabel, Dad, Marcus, Dylan, and Isabel's parents, George and Patricia Wellington. They barely spoke to me throughout the meal, focusing all their attention on their grandchildren. Marcus, tell me about your college plans, Patricia said. I'm going to study engineering at the University of Colorado. Thomas is going to help me with the tuition, Marcus replied, looking at Dad. Dad smiled and nodded, but I could see the worry in his eyes. Marcus's college would cost at least $20,000 a year. And Dylan, what are you going to major in? George asked. I'm going to try music at Denver University. If that doesn't work out, maybe business. Another $20,000 a year. $40,000 a year total, just for college. How was Dad going to pay for that? During the reception, I tried to mingle and chat with the guests. But whenever someone asked about my relationship with the bride and groom, I could feel Isabel watching me. I remembered her rule about not mentioning my mother, and it made me increasingly uncomfortable. Around 8 o'clock, the band started playing, and Dad asked me to dance, a tradition we'd had since I was little. Whenever there was music, Dad would ask me to dance. Can I have this dance with my favorite daughter? He said, holding out his hand. I'm your only daughter, I said, laughing. That's exactly why you're the favorite. We danced for about 3 minutes. It was a slow song, and Dad told me how much he loved me, how important I was to him, and how he hoped Isabel and I would get along better in the future. She's just nervous, he said. When everything calms down, you'll get along fine. I wanted to believe him. I really did. When the song ended, we returned to the table. But I could see Isabel's expression was furious. She stood up and came toward us. Thomas, we need to talk, she said, pulling him aside. I couldn't hear the conversation, but I could see her moving and shaking her head. Dad seemed to be trying to calm her down. A few minutes later, Dad came back to the table. He was pale and wouldn't look me in the eye. Natalie, could you go home early today? Go home. Dad, it's your wedding. Why would I leave? Isabel appeared behind him, her face red with anger. Because you're ruining my wedding day, she said, loud enough for the people at the nearby tables to hear. The silence that followed was deafening. Everyone stopped talking and looked at us. Isabel, please. Dad tried to intervene. No, Thomas. Enough, she screamed. I've tried to be patient, I've tried to be kind, but she just can't accept that you have a new family now. What are you talking about? I asked, genuinely confused. You've spent the whole night trying to get attention for yourself. Talking about your dead mother to the guests, monopolizing my husband, acting like this is your day. I haven't talked about my mother to anyone. And I danced with my father for 3 minutes. 3 minutes that should have been mine. This is my wedding, not a memorial for your mother. Her words stabbed me like knives. I looked to Dad for support, but he was staring at the floor. Dad? I whispered. Natalie, he finally said, still not looking at me, maybe you should go anyway. We don't want any more embarrassment. I felt like the world had collapsed. My own father was asking me to leave his wedding. Okay, I managed to say, even though my voice was shaking. I'll get my purse. And take this with you, Isabel said, handing me a box I hadn't seen before. These are some of your mother's things that were still in the house. We don't need them anymore. I took the box with shaking hands. Inside were my mother's wedding ring, some photos of us, and a necklace Dad had given her for their first wedding anniversary. Natalie. Dad finally looked at me, and I saw tears in his eyes. I'm so sorry. I'm sorry, too, Dad, I replied. I'm sorry for you. I walked out of the Denver Botanic Gardens carrying my purse and the box of my mother's memories. Behind me, the music started up again and the party continued as if nothing had happened. After the wedding, Dad and I barely spoke. He tried to call me a few times in the first few weeks, but I was too hurt to talk to him. How could he choose me over her? How could he abandon me like that? Isabel made sure I was completely cut out of their lives. They changed their phone numbers, blocked me on social media, and when I tried to visit, she told me I was no longer welcome. Thomas doesn't want to have any contact with you anymore, she lied. He said you caused too much drama and that it's better this way. I knew that wasn't true. I knew my father better than anyone, but without access to him, there was nothing I could do. In March 2022, 6 months after the wedding, I got an unexpected call. It was from Dr. Mitchell Torres, our family physician, whom we had known for years. Natalie, I need to talk to you. It's about your father. My heart pounded. What happened? He's been diagnosed with stage 4 pancreatic cancer. He's been admitted to Presbyterian Hospital. The world stopped. Stage 4 pancreatic cancer, I knew what that meant. The same disease that had killed my paternal grandfather. He wants to see me. I asked, afraid of the answer. He specifically asked me to call you. He said Isabel can't know. I rushed to the hospital. Dad was in room 314, hooked up to several machines. He had lost a lot of weight and was pale, but his eyes lit up when he saw me. Natalie, my darling, he whispered, reaching out his hand. I ran to him and held his hand, crying. Dad, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry I haven't talked to you. No, he interrupted. I'm the one who should apologize. I made a terrible mistake in my marriage. The biggest mistake of my life. Dad. Let me talk, please. I don't have much time. His voice was weak. Isabel manipulated me, and I was stupid enough to let her. She convinced me that you were trying to sabotage our marriage, that you couldn't accept my happiness. I just wanted you to be happy, Dad. I know that now. And you were right about her all along. He paused for breath. Do you want to know what she did when she found out about the diagnosis? I shook my head. She said she couldn't handle it, and that maybe it would be best for me to go to a nursing home. A nursing home, Natalie. After all I spent on her and her kids. Where is she now? She went off to think. That was 3 days ago. The boys went with her. He laughed bitterly. Do you know what I found out when she left? That she emptied our joint account. $50,000, everything that was left of our savings and our wedding loan. Gone. I spent the next 2 months going to the hospital every day after work. Dad was getting weaker and weaker, but he was at peace with me. We talked about everything, about Mom, about our life together, about the mistakes he'd made. Natalie, there's something I need to tell you, he said in one of his last weeks. Remember when I told you I'd sold the house to start a new life with Isabel? Yes. I lied. Well, not exactly lied, but I didn't tell you the whole truth. He took a deep breath. I didn't sell our house. I put it in your name. What? The day we signed the papers for the new house, I also signed a deed transferring our old house to you. It's been registered with the land registry for 2 years. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. But Dad, why? Because I knew deep down that I was making a mistake. And that house is where you grew up, where your mother lived, where our memories are. Isabel could never take that away from you. But what about the money from the sale? I took out a loan using the new house as collateral. Isabel never knew. He smiled weakly. Your old dad isn't as naive as he seems. Dad, I don't know what to say. There's more, he continued. My will. Isabel thinks she's going to inherit everything, but she's in for a surprise. He told me that he had secretly updated his will, with the help of the family lawyer, Harold Brennan. Isabel would receive only the minimum required by law, 1/3 of the assets acquired during the marriage, which was basically just the new house, which had more debt than it was worth. Everything else, the old house, her investments, her retirement, everything, would go to me. Why didn't you tell me this before? Because I had hoped that Isabel would change, that our family could work. But mostly because I didn't want you to know that I was dying. Dad passed away peacefully one morning in May, holding my hand. I was with him at the end, singing the songs Mom used to sing to us when I was little. Isabel showed up at the funeral, the first time I'd seen her since the wedding. She was dressed in black, acting up to the few people in attendance, talking about how she was a devastated widow. Where were you the last few months? I asked her after the service. Dealing with your grief, she replied coolly. Some people process grief differently. Dealing with your grief or spending the money you stole from his bank account. Her face flushed. I didn't steal anything. She was my wife. She was entitled to it. We'll see, I said. A week later, the official reading of the will was scheduled at the office of attorney Harold Brennan. Isabel arrived with Marcus and Dylan, all dressed formally, clearly expectant. Harold was a serious, professional man in his 60s. He greeted everyone and began reading the will. I, Thomas William Brooks, being of sound mind. The first few parts were legal formalities. Then came the estate. To my wife, Isabel Wellington Brooks, I leave the house at 425 Maple Street, together with all debts associated therewith, including the mortgage of $180,000 and the loan of $45,000 used for renovations. Isabel smiled, thinking she was getting a house worth $250,000. She had not known about the debts. To my daughter, Natalie Brooks, I leave all my other assets, including the house at 156 Pine Avenue, where we have lived for 15 years, my retirement account of $320,000, my investments and stocks of $180,000, and all personal property not specifically mentioned in this document. The office was silent. Isabel's face went white. Wait, she stammered. There has to be a mistake. The Pine Avenue house was sold 2 years ago. Harold adjusted his glasses. Actually, Mrs. Brooks, the house was never sold. It was transferred to Natalie Brooks in September 2020, 2 years before Mr. Thomas passed away. Here are the registered documents. But the money from the sale. There was no sale. Mr. Thomas financed the purchase of the Maple Street house through loans. Marcus and Dylan looked at their mother, confused and clearly upset. That can't be right. Isabel shouted. I was his wife. He couldn't have done that. Actually, he could, Harold said calmly. He did. I should also inform you that the house you inherited has more debt than it's worth. Technically, you inherited $75,000 in debt. Isabel was furious. She started screaming in the lawyer's office, accusing Dad of fraud, accusing me of manipulation, threatening to sue everyone. He was senile. Sick. She took advantage of the situation. She screamed. Mrs. Brooks, Harold said firmly, your husband updated this will in December 2021, 3 months before his cancer diagnosis. He was in perfect mental health, and I have medical documentation to prove it. December 2021, that was right after the wedding, I realized. Exactly, Harold confirmed. He came to me a week after your wedding. Isabel glared at me with pure hatred. You planned all this, didn't you? You pretended to be the abandoned daughter so he would feel sorry for you. Isabel, I didn't speak to my father for 6 months after the wedding. Do you remember? You made sure of that yourself. But you manipulated him beforehand. The only person who manipulated my father was you. And apparently, he realized that pretty quickly. Harold continued reading, I also leave a letter for my daughter Natalie, to be delivered after the reading of this will. He handed me a sealed envelope. With shaking hands, I opened it and read aloud. My dear Natalie, if you're reading this, it means I didn't have the courage to tell you these things in person. Forgive a cowardly father. I know I've made terrible mistakes, especially in my marriage. I let Isabel convince me that you were the problem, when the problem was always my own insecurity and fear of loneliness. You were always the best part of me and your mother. Smart, generous, hardworking, everything I wanted to be. Isabel made me feel important again, but at your expense, and that was unforgivable. The house on Pine Avenue is rightfully yours. It's where you grew up, where your mother lived, where we are a family. Isabel never understood that family isn't something you buy or replace, it's something you build with love over the years. Use your money wisely. Be happy. And if you ever get married and have children, tell them about Grandma Helen. They deserve to know the wonderful woman you had as a mother. With eternal love, Daddy. By the time I finished reading, there were tears in my eyes. Isabel, Marcus, and Dylan left the office without saying a word. And that's how we get to the present, folks. 3 years have passed since Dad died, and my life has changed completely. The first thing I did was move back into our house on Pine Avenue. It took a little work to fix it up. Isabel had convinced Dad to move some of the furniture, but now it's exactly the way it was when I was a kid. My parents' bedroom is now my office, and I turned my old bedroom into a memorial with photos of our family. With the money from the inheritance, I was able to pay my way through college, buy a new car, and invest in my financial consulting business. Today I have my own company and 3 employees. Dad would be proud. As for Isabel, well, she tried to contest the will, but she was unsuccessful. The house on Maple Street was foreclosed on by the bank 6 months later. She couldn't make the payments. I heard she moved into a small apartment and went back to working at the clothing store. Marcus managed to get into college, but on a scholarship. There was no more money from his stepfather to pay for it. Dylan gave up music and works at a call center. They never spoke to me again, which, honestly, is for the best. You might be wondering if I feel guilty about getting almost the entire inheritance. The answer is, no. And I'll explain why. Isabel didn't love my father, she loved what he could give her and the children. When he got sick, she abandoned him. When he died, she only came back for the inheritance. That's not love, that's opportunism. My father recognized that. He saw that he had made a mistake by throwing me out of the marriage, by choosing her over me. The will was his way of apologizing and making amends for that mistake. But the truth is, I would have forgiven him anyway. Because that's what real family is all about, forgiveness, unconditional love, being there in difficult times. I was there when he died, holding his hand. Isabel was processing her grief somewhere, spending his money. Today, 3 years later, I can say that I am happy. I have my business, my home, and wonderful memories of my father and mother. Sometimes I still miss him, especially when I achieve some professional goal that I know would make him proud. The lesson I learned from this whole experience is that true family is priceless. It cannot be bought, replaced, or manufactured. It is built with time, love, sacrifice, and presence. My father made a mistake by allowing himself to be manipulated by Isabel. He was lonely, vulnerable, and she took advantage of that. But in the end, his love for me spoke louder. The will was proof of that. For anyone watching who has been through similar situations, difficult stepparents, complicated blended families, parents who made bad choices, know that you are not alone. And sometimes, the people we love realize their mistakes, even if it is too late to fix everything. Before I end, I want to say one thing to any Isabel who is watching: love is not something you achieve through manipulation or by isolating someone from their family. True love includes, not excludes. It builds bridges, not burns them. Now I want to hear from you in the comments. Have you ever been through situations of family conflict? How did you deal with it? And most importantly, were you able to find peace in the end? If you liked my story, leave a like below, subscribe to the channel for more content, and share it with someone who needs to hear this. Ring the bell too, so you don't miss the next videos.